Cliptonians. Do you want to learn how to do this? Maybe this? How about a little bit of this? Without a single uber unique. Well, stick around. I'm about to show you exactly how. Before I hop into the details about how the build works, I'm going to show you a little bit of gameplay of a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon without any Ubers on, so take a look. I know that running stuff with no Ubers is pretty important to people. It's not easy to get all of this stuff, so we're going to do a lot of content without any Ubers. So this will just be a quick showcase. We're going to get through this level 100. Whirlwind Hota. We do plenty of damage here, so damage is really not an issue. If you are running into any fury generation issues, or you're running into any survivability issues, there's option for some defensive pants, which I have with me, but right now we're running to bolts, and we're going to see how this goes with it. Maybe we'll die. Who knows? But for now, we're going to keep on some to bolts, keep that damage reduction off the table for now, because things die really, really quickly here, so if we can just close that gap on anything that's distant from us, then we don't really need to worry about that damage reduction. It's really the only thing that I'm too worried about in this dungeon is anything that's out of range. These guys back here, they hit really, really hard, so we want to make sure that we just keep that gap closed. And then those little scorpions back there, man, those things, if they charge up and hit you from a distance, that is pretty rough, pretty rough. Where is this thing at? But you don't need Ubers to make it through this game at a high level. You need a good build, which we got. And maybe a little bit of luck, you know, it's Diablo, so Diablo thrives off of a little bit of luck, a little bit of deaths. So I never play hardcore. I love dying. Pushing this limit. Ooh, yikes. Let's kill these guys here so we can pick this up without dying. Now this thing spawns some ranged guys, so we want to try and find them first. Take those guys out. Let that thing explode. And then we'll move on. We'll pick up a little bit of gear as we go too. Just a little bit. So now we're through. Get those ranged, telling you. Super important. Focus them. Those guys right there. See that damage that it just hit me for? That's all of the ranged classes, so as you're playing through this, make sure you target those. So for this last room here, I always like to spin around in a circle. This way, whatever is coming after me, I've already moved out of the way. If anything explodes, I'm running away from the explosions and not towards the explosions. So like that fire explosions that just went off over there. Save your rallying cries for when you start to get slowed. Like this room has a lot of slow in it, so I keep my rallying cry up. So just in case I need that little extra CC. Let's not die to anything over here. No explosions. Get this last guy here, and that's your tier 100. No Ubers, so we'll just so everybody can see again. Here are your Ubers. They're still sitting in the bag. Got all these aspects here. And there you have it. That was the run. So let's get into how that worked. So we're going to start with our skill tree. Skill tree starts off pretty basic. We just go 2 points into Lending Strike, 1 point to Whirlwind, and then we go into Enhanced Whirlwind, that extra Fury. Super important when we're doing a weapon swap build because we're going to be blowing through Fury really, really fast. Max out Hota, go all the way down Enhanced into Fury's Hammer. We come down here, we're going to take Rallying Cry. I like to go up into tactical just because that little extra boost of fury is great to have just to get started on a run. I did take 3 points into health for the non-Uber build. If you're running an Uber build, you don't need that additional health. You have a ton of it already. So you can actually swap that out and you can bring it down here into Wallop. Next we got Warcry. We go all the way out to Power Warcry. This is not really super necessary. It might be a little bit better when the Gauntlet launches, but it does not work for bosses. So if you're only going to be running bosses, you can move that point around too. For this non-Uber build, we're running points in the Booming Voice, and we're running points in the Guttural Yell for a little bit of extra damage reduction. If you were going to be running the Uber version of this, you could go right into here for some additional Fury gain. It'll give you a little extra boost for your Limitless Rage, unless you want movement speed. I love movement speed. You can never really go wrong with that. We got 1 point of charge all the way down through Enhanced and through Power Charge. So whenever you hit 3 targets or more, your cooldown gets reduced by 9 seconds. So it's actually really, really helpful to keep that charge up, which gives us Unstoppable, and it also gives us back resources from our Tibolt's Will, if we're running Tibolt's Will. Then we went into Aggressive Resistance, Prolific Fury, for that extra Fury generation, because again, Fury generation is going to be king for this build. Pit Fighter gets a little bit of distance damage reduction. Thick-Skinned, counter-offensive, can't go wrong with this. It's a little bit of extra damage when you're fortified, which we're going to be fortified all the time because of a Paragon board, but we'll go over that in a little bit. Defensive Stance, again, this is the non-Uber version, so I end up taking this here, but it never really hurts to have it more damage reduction, so if you needed to leave that right in there, you can. If you want to swap it out, I would throw some more points into Tempered Fury, because the more Max Fury we have, the harder your Hota hits. So if we go right up into Fury's Hammer, 1% additional damage for each point of Fury you had when you used it. So if you're running 200% Max Fury, 200% additional damage to Hota. This is why this ability is so good. Coming back down, we're going to go down into Heavy-Handed. Whenever you're using a two-handed weapon, you deal 15% increased critical strike damage. If you're running a Grandfather, that's a great multiplier. If you're not, you can actually probably swap these 3 right into Wallop, because that'll give you that 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. So that would probably be a better option for the non-Uber version. Brute Force, your overpower deals increased damage when you're using a two-hander, so Hota always uses two-handers, and you can also set your charge to use a two-handed weapon also. Whirlwind never crits or never overpowers, so there's no point in using this for Whirlwind, but we go all the way down the Wrath of the Berserker chain. This can be moved around a little bit depending on what you're running, but Max Fury, but then this is a great ability. Invigorating Fury heals you 9% of your maximum life for each 100 Fury spent, so you need some life, that's a great way to heal. Here's where the build gets super heavy damage, but also very, very, very cost effective for your skills. So that extra 100% Fury on Hota takes it from 35 Fury all the way up to 70. So if you don't have enough Fury generation, it becomes quite a burden. Options here, you could always take Walking Arsenal, or you can always take Unconstrained. Both are good options, both do much damage, and you will not run out of Fury if you run this build with those two at all. You can hammer infinitely. But I like to run it here, and I like to watch my Fury conservation as I'm doing it. So that's the skill tree. Well, let's take a look at the Paragon board. In your starter board here, you have 2 options. Left side, right side. Down the left-hand side is what I normally take for my non-Uber build, because we get a little bit of extra life. Down the other side, we get a little bit extra damage, so if I'm running Ubers, that's the side that I'll take. In our glyph slot, we're running Wrath. Wrath is super important for Fury management because we gain back 3 Fury, and that's multiplied by your resource generation every time we critically strike. So Whirlwind crits all the time. Hota is guaranteed to crit with your Ring of Red Fury. So our Fury constantly goes up every time that we start hitting enemies. For the next board, we took Crusher. So Crusher deals damage, or you gain extra damage with maces, and then while you're wielding a mace, which Hota does, it gives you a 30x multiplier to your Overpower. And Overpower is where we hit all of the big crits. So this is a really, really great damage increase. For the Uber version, I generally go down towards the physical side. For the non-Uber version, I come down to resistances. When I'm running through these boards here, I always take all of the maximum Fury nodes. If we remember when we were looking at the skill tree, Hota deals additional damage for each Fury spent when you hammer. So if you are at 200 Fury, then it's going to do 200% increased damage. So that's why we take all of the max Fury nodes, so that we can get as much out of Hota as we can. I took the Warbringer node here. Every 75 Fury spent, you gain 15% of your max life as Fortify. Your Fortify goes through the roof. You are always fortified. This is very, very, very helpful to have. For the next glyph and the next board that we took, we went into Martial. So you have two options here. Martial will reduce the cooldown of your charge or your Wrath of the Berserker. All of the other skills does not reduce the cooldown for, because they stop doing shouts now. It's only your non-shout skills. So for this one, if you don't use Wrath of the Berserker or you don't use charge enough and you want a second option, Might is actually a great option for that, because all you do is just gain your extra damage. They're both 40-40 for strength, so they're completely interchangeable with the way the board is built, and you deal an increased damage while wielding a two-handed weapon. So extra damage, same exact nodes, all you do is just swap them out. I normally go back and forth between the two depending on what I feel like doing for the day. Then we went into the legendary node. Well, Berserking, critical strikes increase your attack speed by 2% up to 16. So attack speed is super important for this build, because the more attack speed you have, the faster you can swap weapons, which means you get Fury back faster. You're spending more Fury to get more healing, more Fortify. It is very, very, very important. So this is a great legendary node to go into. Next board is Blood Rage. We went Ire in the Blood Rage node. So Ire is a very, very, very big damage increase glyph. It gives you almost 70% damage while berserking, and then you also take 10% reduced damage from elites. What makes this so great is the node itself. So your legendary node, Blood Rage. This takes 25% of all of your damage while berserking and converts it to a straight multiplicative number. So 61% of all of my is added right to my damage line. So taking all of the damage while berserking nodes like this right here are key to increasing that number. Now, the killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to grant berserking for 5 seconds. That's also great, because we want to be berserking completely 100% of the time. So this is also just adds a little bit of extra to it. So in this one, we took damage to bleeding enemies and then some damage reduction from bleeding, and that we get from our skill tree. Going down, we went into the Decimator node, and we took Dominate. So Dominate adds, for this board, about 200% increase to overpower damage, as well as every 30 seconds, your next attack will overpower, after not overpowering. So if you're out running towards another boss, or you're in the middle of an encounter, you have 30 seconds between it, you're going to get a guaranteed overpower hit. Decimator, each time that you make an enemy vulnerable, your damage is increased by 10% X for 5 seconds. Overpowering a vulnerable enemy grants an additional 10% X bonus for 5 seconds. So you're looking at 20% X straight to your damage line. Awesome. So our last two boards, we actually have running 7 boards here. We went up for number 6, into Bonebreaker. So this is another source of guaranteed overpower, which is amazing. The more we overpower, the better. And I made this number 6 so that we could still activate this damage reduction while fortified node here. And then for number 7, we did Weapon Master. This is the key end-all be-all for this build. And when we get into our skills and our weapons, we'll go over exactly why this is so good. But swapping weapons grants you 4% of your maximum fury. And that is the whole Paragon board. That is the skill tree and the Paragon board. Now we're going to go over the basics of the class and how it works. We are running a weapon swap build. So the first thing we got to do is make sure that our weapons are set up correctly. You have 3 attacking abilities in this build: Hammer of the Ancients, Whirlwind, Charge. So how we set our skills: when you go down to your skills at the bottom here, Hammer of the Ancients is always going to be set to your bludgeoning weapon. You can't change that, so we have to work around that. So when you come over to Whirlwind, I have Whirlwind set to my dual wield weapons. And then when I go to Charge, I have Charge set to my slashing weapons. So slashing weapons are either going to be your sword, axe, or your polearm, and then your dual wield are going to be all of your one-handed weapons. These you can cycle through on the mouse just by pressing down on the mouse wheel, and it swaps back and forth between all the weapons. But you want to make sure that it's set to 1, 2, 3 types of weapons. If not, this build will not work. Your fury will tank. Now we're going to cover what weapon swapping is and how to do it. We're going to get some fury. Every time that we use an ability, so Charge will use our slashing weapons, Whirlwind will use our dual wield, and Hammer of the Ancients will use our bludgeoning weapon. So now I've swapped weapons 3 times. The way this build works is you're going to rotate mostly between Whirlwind and Hammer of the Ancients while you cycle in Charge as a utility. I'm going to give you a little bit of gameplay for how this weapon swapping works and how to get back your fury. As we went over the Paragon board, we took the Weapon Master node. Swapping weapons grants you 4% of your maximum fury. That maximum fury that you get back is also multiplied by your fury generation. Fury generation comes from things like resource generation on your rings, or resource generation on your banished lords. As you swap weapons, you're going to get back fury, and this is what it's going to look like. So when we went over the skill tree, we took Unbridled Rage. Unbridled Rage has some fury issues when you're running this build without any Ubers. We're going to leave it on so you can see it, and then we're going to swap to Unconstrained. You can see the difference between the two. So how this works is we're going to pop a fury generation, and then we're going to just hammer. So as you can see, my fury is not going down very quickly, but it definitely is going down. And if we can maintain hitting all of the targets, then our fury generation will stay up. As long as we're hitting with Whirlwind, but if we just start to hammer too many times, it goes down. So this is the way that your weapon swap works, and this is the way that your fury generation works here. That's why we're running a weapon swap build. If you look here, as we spent a ton of fury, our fortify is all the way up. Our fury stayed up. We were able to maintain and keep on attacking, but we have to be hitting everything. If we swap to a single target dummy here, and we're going, we get the same exact thing as long as we are critting as we're hitting, but now my fury's gone because I wasn't hitting as many targets. So if we swap straight out to Unconstrained, we'll go start with that instead of our walking arsenal, but they both give the same results. Fury generation popped, and as we swap our weapons now, we don't run into any fury issues at all. So if fury generation is an issue for you, then swap to Unconstrained. We still do a lot of damage, but we can also just run around and hit. So as long as we're hitting something, it's going to get back that fury generation, and we'll be able to maintain it. And all you have to do if you're running low is you pop something like, even there, it's just going back up. Slowly but surely, we're climbing back up. That is your Fury generation, and that's your weapon swapping. There are a couple of reasons with this build if you want to swap weapons. We already covered one of them. That was in your Paragon board, your weapons master node. Swapping weapons gives you back that 4% of your Fury. That is a massive source of Fury generation, and this build will not run without it. The second reason is your Earthstriker aspect. After you swap weapons 8 times, your next non-basic skill will overpower and deal 100% increased overpower damage. This is where all the big hits come from. This is the one right here. What this looks like. If you look down on the bottom here, this is your weapon master buff. That little 5 next to it means I've already swapped weapons 5 times. So every time I use an ability that with a different weapon, that will increase. If I charge, it goes up to 6. If I whirlwind, it goes to 7. And I hammer. Now we're at 8, and my next attack will overpower. Great news about this ability is that whirlwind never overpowers. So we can whirlwind all day long, and we'll never use this. This will only be for Hammer of the Ancients or charge. You want it to be for Hammer of the Ancients because this is where all of your damage comes from. So as we overpower and as we hit next, that blue is your overpower. So now we start back at 0. Charge, whirlwind, hammer. Now we're back at 3. Those are your main reasons for wanting to swap weapons. With overpower, you have your Earthstriker aspect and Weapon Master node. Next thing I want to cover is 2 skills that are in our skill tree that we didn't really touch on too much, but I want to explain the interaction between the skills and some of the Paragon boards and some of the aspects that we use. So we pull up our skill tree here, and we look at these 2 nodes here. Outburst and Tough as Nails. Outburst, now we gain thorns automatically. So we also gain thorns for each of the maximum bonus lives that we have. This thorns combined with Tough as Nails increases your thorns by 3%, and when an enemy hits you, they take additional 10% of your thorns damage as bleed. So every time somebody hits you, they start to bleed. Well, why is bleeding important? If you're running this build without Ubers and you find yourself dying, you have the option to put on damage reduction pants. These pants are not ideal. I would actually re-roll that armor, total armor stat line to HP or damage reduction from bleeding, which those 2 nodes would give me that bleeding damage. Your Iron Blood aspect, you gain 4% damage reduction for each nearby enemy up to 20%. So, but they have to be bleeding to gain that damage reduction. So 20% damage reduction straight off the bat is huge. They have to hit you first, then they have to start bleeding. But this is one of the reasons that we want those 2 skill points. The other one is in your Paragon board. So if we come over here, we took 2 nodes, damage reduction from bleeding enemies, 8%, it's pretty big, and 20% damage increase to enemies that are bleeding. So these 2 nodes would be pretty useless if we didn't take those 2 skill points. So those are very, very important skill points. They're easy to miss and they seem kind of meaningless, but very, very important as you can see, and then options for additional damage reduction. Next, we're going to go over the aspects that we're running for the non-Uber version, which don't really change all too much when you're running the Ubers, but we'll just talk about that after. For the helmet, we're running Relentless Berserker. For your chest piece, you're running Juggernaut. On your gloves, we're running Ancestral Force, DeVolt's Will, or Iron Blood on some damage reduction pants. Because we're running Relentless Berserker on our helmet, we are able to run Ghostwalker, which is great for movement speed. On our 2-handed mace, we're running Earthstriker for that extra 100% increase overpower damage. I'm actually running accelerating, which most people haven't run accelerating, but when I tested it out, it feels super smooth. We heal faster, we hit harder, we proc Earth Striker faster. And then I'm running elements, Limitless Rage. Ring of Red Fury is amazing. We kind of can't get away with it. I actually need a better one for some better resource generation. Echoing Fury on our other ring, and then Banished Lord's Talisman. If you need to, this can also be swapped out for maybe a movement speed amulet with some extra damage reduction, but this is a huge damage increase for you. It's a lot of regeneration, so it is very, very recommended to keep that on. If you're going to be running your Uber setup, you're actually going to keep Limitless Rage on over Accelerating, and then you're going to put your Grandfather on. Your Ring of Starless Sky is going to go on over your Echoing Fury. Your Shaco is going to go on over your Relentless Berserker, and then your Relentless Berserker is going to go onto your boots. So that'll be your aspect setup. Let's go over the Seneschal setup. So for the Governing Stones, I'm running Tempest and Flash of Adrenaline. If you don't have access to Evernight or Genesis, I have a setup here without. Tempest attacks every 0.9 seconds. We are not running Exploit Glyph, so this is our main source of vulnerable damage. Then we're running Arcing Support so that it hits 10 additional enemies. So everything in the room becomes vulnerable all at one time. And then I have Resource Support on here. Can never hurt to get a little bit of extra fury. Flash of Adrenaline, it increases damage dealt by 20%. If you use that in combination with your Tactical Support, where it decreases the cooldown of Flash of Adrenaline, and Duration Support, where it increases the duration, you end up with 12-second cooldown and 12 seconds of damage. So basically, this is always up and is never down. I threw Safeguard Support on here, just an extra 15% damage you just can't go wrong with. When you want to switch out Genesis and Evernight for these two, you just take off Safeguard and you're going to take off Resource Support. And then you're going to put Evernight with your Tempest. And then Genesis goes into Flash of Adrenaline. This increases the effectiveness of the supported skill, which Flash of Adrenaline is the supported skill. So now you see we have damage dealt by 50% instead of 20%. So it's a huge jump. So those are the setups that I have for both the Uber and the non-Uber version of Genesis and Evernight right here. Last thing I'm going to leave you with today is just a little bit of gameplay hitting some dummies, because can never get enough of those hits. So we're going to do this with our non-Uber setup. So we're going to swap those right on back, and then we're going to hit some dummies. Poor dummies. So as you're doing this, just to talk about it a little bit, Hota has a range, so you want to try and stay at distance so that you hit all of your targets, but you don't actually stay in melee range. So it takes a little bit of practice, but you go backwards, and then you Hota forwards, and you go backwards, and you Hota forwards. This will help keep yourself safe. You don't have to worry too much about it getting hit, because the more you stay alive, the better. All right, well, we saw 366 million there. No Ubers whatsoever. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Appreciate you all being here. Have a great night. Hey everyone, if you are enjoying the content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click that button. I am live on Twitch just about every day. Hope I see you there.